Well, good morning. This is week 2, day 1.
All rise for the jury,
of
please.
Colorado versus Letecia Stauch. I appreciate you being here. Court started right on time, so I'm going to cut my mic and we will pay attention to them.
Thank you. You may all be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start our day again as we have every other day. Has anything occurred since we were last together that causes any of you to believe you could not continue to serve as a fair and impartial juror in this case? If so, please raise your hand. No response? All right. When we took our break on Friday, we were still in the midst of the prosecution's case in chief. That's where we will resume today. Mr. Allen, call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Dr. Susan Ignacio.
Dr. Ignacio, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am.
And then the witness stands right there.
You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand. All right, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, will you please introduce yourself to our jury and then spell your first and last name for the record?
My name is Susan Ignacio, SUSANIGNACIO.
Dr. Ignacio, what is your occupation?
I'm an associate medical examiner
Where is that?
at the District 6 Medical Examiner's Office in Largo, Florida.
Okay. Can you give the jury your employment history basically as an assistant medical examiner?
I did a year after my fellowship in forensic pathology in Miami. I did a year in District 5, that's in Leesburg, Florida. And then after that, I worked at the District 6 Medical Examiner's Office, and it's been approximately 23 years.
23 years as a associate medical examiner?
Yes.
What do you do as an associate medical examiner?
We determine the cause and manner of death by performing autopsies or external examinations of a dead person.
Okay. Do you have specific education that allows you to do that job?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury about that, please?
4 years of med school, 5 years of general pathology, a year of forensic pathology.
What schools did you go to?
I went to med school in the Philippines, and then I did my 5 years of general pathology in Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, and then a year of forensic pathology in the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office.
Do you also participate in training that allows you to stay current on your job?
Yes.
Tell the jury some of that, please.
Conferences by the National Association of Medical Examiners and the Florida Association of Medical Examiners.
Are you licensed?
Yes,
Tell the jury about that.
my license?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what state are you licensed?
Oh, I'm licensed in Florida.
How long have you been licensed in Florida?
24 years, I think.
Do you have certifications that you hold as a part of your job?
Yes, we have to take a board exam after my general pathology residency. I had to take a board exam that's in anatomic pathology. So I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, and then I had to take a board exam after my forensic pathology. So I'm board certified in forensic pathology.
Okay. How long have you held that certification?
20 years.
Okay. Quite a long time.
Yes.
How many autopsies have you performed as an associate medical examiner?
At least 6,000.
Have you testified as an expert witness in a court proceeding?
Yes.
Can you give the jury a rough estimate as to how many times you've testified as an expert?
I don't know. It's too many to count.
Can you give the jury an impression of where you've testified as an expert? And what I mean by where is which courts?
Mostly in Florida, or all in Florida, in Miami, Pinellas and Pasco counties. Those are my counties in District 6. I testified in federal court in Tampa, which is Hillsborough County. When I used to work in District 5, there are 5 counties, so I testified in those 5 courthouses. Volusia County, which is Daytona Beach, and Miami-Dade.
Okay, so am I right to understand that you've testified as an expert witness in both federal court and in state court,
Yes.
all in Florida?
Yes.
At this time, I would move to have Dr. Ignacio qualified as an expert witness in forensic pathology.
Defense?
No objection.
Witness will be so qualified. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Ignacio, I want to have you go back to March of 2020. Were you helping out in Santa Rosa County for any autopsies that they needed at that time?
Yes.
Did you get involved in an autopsy of a young child by the name of Gannon Stauch?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury how that happened, how you got involved in that?
We were helping District 1, which is in Pensacola. We were covering that district, so I happened to be working that week there.
And what were the, I guess, the initial information that you got before you performed that autopsy?
I was told that there was a decomposed body of a child found inside a suitcase underneath the highway.
Were you able to see some pictures of that body as it was recovered underneath that bridge?
Yes, I saw the scene photos.
And then the body that was brought to you for the autopsy process, was it the same body that you were able to visually observe in those photographs from the scene under the bridge?
Yes.
What date did you actually perform the autopsy?
On March 18.
Okay. And Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibits 144 through 180?
You may go ahead.
First, and Your Honor, can I stand here for just a moment? while I
Yeah,
get
that's fine.
These bigger diagrams. I'm showing you what's first been marked as 144. Do you recognize this?
Yes,
What is 144?
that's my body diagram.
Is this taken directly from your autopsy report?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the overall body diagram that you generated for this autopsy?
Yes.
And then 145 and 146, do you recognize these items?
Yes.
145, what does it appear to be? This is the top one.
Yeah, that's the diagram of the head.
Did you prepare this when you prepared your autopsy report in this case?
Yes,
And then 146, do you recognize this?
yes.
What is 146?
It's the diagram of the top of the head, the skull, and under the chin.
Is it, did you prepare this the same time as you performed or prepared the autopsy report for this case?
Yes,
Are these exhibits 144, 145, and 146 fair and accurate representations of the diagrams you prepared?
yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move for admission of 144, 145, and 146.
Defense?
No objection, Judge.
You will have to submit copies of those for uploading after the case is done, because obviously you can't do those. So, but other than that, 144, 145, and 146 are admitted. Go ahead.
And then, Doctor, while I'm going to set these diagrams up, if you could look through the rest, 147 through 180, I believe it is. Will you flip through those and tell me when you're done looking at those?
Okay,
Have you had a chance to look through all of those, Doctor?
yes.
What do all of 147 through 180 appear to be?
These are the photographs of the decedent.
Are they fair and accurate representations of what you saw when you performed the autopsy on March 18th of 2020 on the young child Gannon Stauch?
Yes,
Your Honor, at this time, I would move for admission of 147 through 180.
Mr. Cook.
No objection.
It's 147 through 180 will be admitted. Go ahead.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
So Dr. Ignacio, I've got 147 on the board behind you. And then to help the jury understand what we're looking at here, if you need to reference any of the body diagrams, please just let us know which body diagram that we need to have up on the easel. And then we'll use that to coincide with what we have in the photographs up on the screen. Is that okay?
Okay.
So in People's 147, is that a picture from the scene underneath the bridge of the boy that was eventually identified as Gannon Stauch?
Yes.
And is that the same child that you performed the autopsy on March 18th?
Yes.
Okay. You could advance to 148. So we're looking at People's Exhibit 148 now on the screen. Let's just go preliminarily. Are there very apparent signs of decomposition visible in People's Exhibit 148?
Yes.
Can you just describe, so that the jury understands, what it is that you are calling that decomposition?
The whole body looks decomposed. It doesn't look like, normal fresh body. You see a brown gray discoloration on the skin. The right hand, you can already see the bones because it's starting to decompose the skin.
Dr. Ignacio, that red handled thing is a pointer. I see that you're
Oops.
pointing with your hand. That may help you, may not. It's up to you.
Okay.
And the tip of that thing pops off just to keep you on your toes, doctor.
So you can see that the right hand, you're already losing some skin there, so the bone's exposed. You're already seeing bone here because the skin's already decomposed and disappeared, brown discoloration all over.
And then there's black linear lines in the abdomen and chest area, and also on the, I guess would be the left hip there. Are those also signs of decomposition, or what does that appear to be?
Yes, I think it looks like could be from the clothing.
Okay. So clothing can have an effect on a body as it's decomposing as well?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a measurement device there in People's Exhibit 148 as well. Is
Yes.
there a wound apparent in People's Exhibit 148 that you can point out for the jury?
Yes,
And if you need to stand up, you can feel free.
there's a laceration here on the left chest. Right, this one here. You can't really see it clearly because of the decomposition. The lines are ill-defined. There's a wound here, a wound here, here. There's another wound up here.
And then as we go through these photos, is it a wide angle shot like this where you can see sort of contextually where a wound might be and then it zooms in closer in the next photo?
Yes.
All right. When you say a laceration, just so that we're all on the same page.
It's
Yeah.
not a laceration, it's a sharp force injury.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to ask you about. A sharp force injury, what does that mean when a person like you, a medical examiner, says that?
It's a wound caused by a sharp object like a knife or a blade.
Okay. And can you tell us, generally speaking, we're going to look at a number of these sort of sharp force injuries. Are these deep injuries, shallow injuries, generally speaking?
It depends. Some could be shallow, superficial, or they can be deep.
And that's as apparent in this particular autopsy as well. Some are deeper than others.
Yes.
Okay. If we could go on to 149. Is 149 a close-up of what we just looked at in 148?
Yes, this is a close-up.
So can you tell us, as we look at that, how we understand that to be a sharp force injury? What about it tells us that?
Looking at the wound here, you can't really tell it clearly, but when it went into the rib, the third rib, you could see that it's a sharp, like clean cut line because it hit the rib and the space between the two ribs, which is called the intercostal space where there's muscle. So that wound there looks like a knife wound or something that's sharp, caused by something sharp.
Did the decomposition state of this body cause some difficulty in identifying injuries that might have been contributing to what caused the death in this case?
Some of them.
Okay. Now, if we can move on to 150.
This is another sharp force injury. And you can see that it doesn't really look like a sharp force injury because it's got jagged edges from the decomposition. But then you can see the wound inside, that it was just like a linear, straight, clean cut wound.
If we could go on to 151.
And that's a close up of the wound.
So let's talk, now that we're seeing this one close up. This looks almost like a hole in the body as opposed to a slit or a slice or maybe even a stab. Tell the jury why that might be for this particular injury and how you can still call this a sharp force injury.
Yes, if you look at the skin here where it was cut, it's clean, it's a straight line. But because of decomposition, there's stretching of the skin and it loses elasticity. So that's why it looks round and not slit-like. Like this one is another wound that looks like a sharp force injury. You can see that it's got sharp tips. That looks like a knife wound.
Okay. If we can move on to 152, I believe the numbering is.
So there's another sharp force injury in the chest, the left chest. And you can see that it's also elongated. That didn't enter the chest cavity, but just hit the muscle, the pectoralis muscle.
Okay, and then 153.
That's a close up. You can see that it's got a clean line there. Straight edge.
Okay, and then these measuring devices that we see in these photographs, does that help us give an idea as to how long a particular wound might be?
Yes.
Okay. 154.
Showing the sharp force injury that's like right above the clavicle on the left.
One thing I want to have you point out in this particular photo, Dr. Ignacio, is there's a blurred area on this particular photo. Has that been altered?
Yes.
Does that just, if it had been unblurred, would show the victim's face?
Yes.
And is this just to be more sensitive to the victim and potentially the jurors as we're watching this or looking at these?
Yes.
155.
This just shows you a close-up view of the same one that was above the clavicle, left clavicle.
And this one again looks almost roundish. How can you tell and how can we understand this to be a sharp force injury as well?
The edges are clean and straight. It's not jagged. And the wound that was in the muscle was also straight.
Okay. 156.
This one shows you another sharp force injury in the left upper arm that's near the armpit, right there.
And 157.
And this is a close-up view.
So now that we've seen several of these sharp force injuries where they're almost pulled open and in a rounded appearance, is that basically what you testified to earlier, that as the skin is shrinking and pulling away, that it pulls the wound open more than it would have if we were close in time to when these injuries occurred?
Yes.
Okay. 158.
Here's another sharp force injury on the left wrist region.
And this one we can now see must have been taken before the clothing was taken off the body. You can see some of the clothing that the victim was wearing. Is that likely what the person was wearing when they died?
Yes,
How can you tell that?
because of all the fluids, decomposition fluids, the coloring, the clothing.
We had a crime scene technician from Santa Rosa testify late last week that also testified that there were defects in the clothing indicating that there were these slices or sharp object cuts into the fabric that coincided with the injuries we see on the body. Did you notice that as well?
Yes.
Okay. 159.
159 is a close-up view of the wound on the left upper arm, like near the axilla.
Okay. In all of these injuries that we're looking at, are all of those injuries marked on that body diagram that you have up on the easel there, which
Yes.
is 144?
Yes.
Okay. If we could go to 161. Is that right? 160, my apologies. What are we looking at in 160?
So this is a photograph of the left hand, and it kind of covers, the ruler covers it, but there's another cut here. Sharp force injury.
Then moving on to 161.
And this is the right hand, the back of the right hand. And you can see here that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 wounds here. And you can see like the edges are clean cut caused by a sharp object.
When we're looking at these in conjunction with the last photo of the arm and then this one here with hands, when we're talking about cuts to the hands in the forearm areas of Gannon Stauch, how would you characterize those types of wounds?
They're consistent with defensive wounds, trying to protect yourself.
Indicating that potentially Gannon was putting his hands up to guard against whatever was happening,
Yes,
and then they get cut in the process of that.
yes.
Okay. 162, please.
This one shows, excuse me, this one shows the right hand, like the palmar aspect of the right hand. And this is another cut in the middle finger, right middle finger.
163.
Same photo. This is the ring finger.
Right.
This is the, oh, sorry. No, sorry. That's the middle finger and the ring finger right here.
Okay. And then you're just pulling the fingertip back to be able to see that particular cut more towards the, I guess, the pad of the fingertip.
Yes.
164, please.
So we're looking at his back, and there's a sharp force injury on the left upper back, right there.
This sharp force injury to the upper back, was this one of the deeper sharp force injuries that you were able to document that Gannon suffered?
Yes, it fractured the left sixth rib, and it also penetrated the left fifth intercostal space. So that's the space between the fifth and sixth ribs.
Does that then cause, I guess, entry into, I guess, the back side of the chest cavity? Does it go that deep?
Yes, it does enter the chest cavity.
165.
And that's a close-up view of the back injury.
Again, is this a sharp force injury similar to the other sharp force injuries we've been looking at this morning?
Yes.
166.
So there's another sharp force injury here. Another one here.
Would this be essentially the back side of Gannon's left shoulder?
Yes. So this wound ended in the scapula. It hit the bone here, so it just went through the bone, the shoulder blade. And then this one went deeper into the shoulder joint, the left shoulder joint, about 4 inches deep.
4 inches deep, you said?
Yes.
167, please. This is a close-up of that more shallow injury, and then the other deeper one is apparent sort of to the left of that.
Yes.
There appears to be some black fiber there. Can you tell the jury what that is?
It could be from his jacket or t-shirt.
So basically fibers from clothing.
Yes.
Is it common for fibers from clothing to get caught up in wounds when there's these sharp force injuries that travel from outside of clothing through the clothing and into the body?
Yes.
168.
This is another view of the top of the shoulder where you can see the injury that went into the shoulder joint.
169.
That's a close-up view. And you know that it's a sharp force injury because it's got clean edges here.
So when you're pointing at those, what you call clean edges, to me, it doesn't necessarily look that way, but I'm not in your shoes with your expertise. Those edges that you're pointing at, is that where the skin would have met before being sliced open?
Yes, this is fat, subcutaneous tissue underneath the skin. So these are the skin edges, but they just like, stretched and separated. But this is where it was cut.
And is this that deeper injury that you mentioned just a moment ago?
Yes,
To the, basically the top, maybe backish part of his left shoulder?
it entered the shoulder joint.
Okay. 170?
This one is a blurred photo of another sharp force injury on the left forearm.
The inside of the left forearm?
Yes,
And then this one also has a blurred area sort of in the groin area. Do you see that?
yes,
Is that blurred out just for sensitivity's sake?
yes.
171.
And that's a close-up view. So you can see it's got another sharp edge and you've just got tissue that's coming out from the wound, but that's the cut edge right here.
Okay. And this is on the, what I would describe as inside of the left wrist, is that right?
Yes,
Or forearm area?
yes.
172. What are we looking at in 172?
So this is the head and you're looking at the left side, the ear is right here. So there's a cut right in the posterior or the back part of the ear on the scalp.
173.
And a close-up view, the cut.
Let's talk, since we're now seeing for the first time head injuries. Can you tell the jury, just so that we're all clear, do head injuries have a tendency to bleed heavier than other types of injuries that a human could sustain?
Yes, there's a lot of blood vessels in the scalp.
And does that cause more bloodletting, potentially staining of scenes where blood is coming out of a person?
Yes.
174.
So we're looking at the right side of the head and we're trying to show, this time it's a laceration. It's not caused by a sharp object. It's caused by a blunt object. So we call them lacerations because it's so hard to see because it's decomposed, but the edges are jagged and underneath the skin, you can still see what they call tissue bridging. That means it wasn't completely cut. Like with a knife, you can completely cut the skin and the subcutaneous tissue, but with blunt trauma, with a blunt object, you may still see some tissue that's not separated yet. So this is a laceration on the right temporal region.
So would this be basically right side of the head towards almost a little bit to the back of the head there?
Yes, the ear is right here, right ear, and then you can see that there's a wound here.
Okay. 175.
And here you can see the wound. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the wound right here. And you can see like the edges are not like a knife wound.
So these injuries, as you look at them as the expert in this, the edges are different to you from what we've seen before from the sharp force injuries.
Yes.
And then when we talk about a blunt force injury like this, what kind of things can cause a blunt force injury like these?
Any blunt object like a bat, piece of wood, hammer.
Could even the butt of a gun.
Yes.
176.
So this is another laceration that's on the top of the head.
And when you say laceration, are we again talking about another blunt force injury
Yes.
to the top of Gannon's head?
Yes, and then this is the skull, the bone right here, and there are no fractures.
Okay. 170, is it 77? 177.
So this is the one we were looking at previously. And then there were other two lacerations on the top of the head.
And again, just so that we're clear, when we say other two lacerations on the top of the head, are those other two also blunt force injuries?
Yes, and you can see that the edges are jagged. It's not like a clean cut. So that's why I called it laceration.
Okay. 178.
So when we peel the scalp, remember the laceration that was on the right temporal region behind the ear? These are skull fractures right here. And then some of the bone fell, and you can see some brain tissue, decomposed brain. So this is a fracture, 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 fracture.
When we talk about this area of the skull, you use the word temporal. Does that to layperson mean temple area basically extending to the back area?
Yes,
Is that bone thinner than other parts of the skull on the head?
yes, the temporal bone is, but it also involves the other bones.
And so what I'm driving at is, would it take a lot of force to cause these types of fractures through a blunt force strike?
Yes,
And just so we're clear, since we've moved past the sharp force injuries and now we've looked at all of the blunt force injuries in these photographs, how many sharp force injuries did Gannon suffer that you were able to document in your autopsy?
I counted 18.
And then as it relates to the number of blunt force injuries that Gannon suffered, how many did those occur?
4 lacerations.
4 lacerations that coincide with blunt force injury?
Yes.
Okay. If we could move on to 179. What are we looking at in 179?
So this is the left side of the face. Here's the ear, head, eye area. This is the jaw. The left side of the jaw, lower jaw. And there's a hole right here.
What caused that hole?
This is due to a gunshot wound.
180.
And this is a close-up gunshot wound.
Is it typical, doctor, when you document a gunshot to try to figure out path the bullet traveled as it entered into a human victim?
Yes,
Did you do that in this case?
yes.
Can you describe, either using the diagrams or just through words, however you want to do it, can you describe the path that this particular bullet took through Gannon as it entered his body?
I think we should use,
Okay, I'll come over and help.
oh, it's not really.
Which one do you want? 46, 145? 145? Make it easier on our jury, we also got the shortest easel we could find. So I'm gonna hold this up actually, doctor, if that's
I
okay.
can go back.
That's, well, they won't be able to see it.
Ah,
Put it
okay.
back there.
So the entrance gunshot wound was in the left side of the jaw, lower jaw, the mandible. This entered the oral cavity. It hit the cervical, this second and third cervical vertebrae. So it went to the back. It crossed the midline, and I recovered the projectile. It didn't enter the skull, the cranial cavity, so I recovered it on the right side where the muscles are of the neck. So there was a projectile that went from left to right and then front to back.
And then, so when you recovered the projectile, was it still in the, basically the muscle tissue in the back of the head?
Yes.
Okay. So, doctor, you can sit back down if you'd like. When we're talking about the types of injuries that Gannon, that you were able to identify that Gannon had suffered, 18 sharp force injuries, 4 blunt force lacerations, and then one gunshot through the chin. Does that indicate to you that there's some progression that these injuries had to occur in?
Yes.
Tell the jury what we mean by that and what it is that you're using to rely on and make that conclusion.
Um, regarding the sharp force injuries coming first.
Well, do you know which one came first?
I don't really know, but I'm thinking that it's the sharp force injuries because he could still defend himself. And then I don't know which one came first, the gunshot wound or the blunt trauma to the head, which caused fractures of his skull and bleeding in his brain.
So the best that you can tell is that sharp force injuries occurred before gunshot. Is that right?
Yes.
But it's unclear whether blunt force or gunshot, which one of those occurred first.
Yes.
Does that indicate some period of time to achieve all of those injuries for whoever was attacking him?
Yes.
The fact that there's 18 sharp force injuries
Yes.
and then 4 blunt force injuries
Yes.
and then a gunshot that entered into the lower left chin and traveled through the oral cavity and all that.
Yes.
What were you able to rule as the cause and manner of death for Gannon Stauch?
My cause of death was gunshot wound and blunt head trauma of the head.
Were there contributing factors to the cause of death?
Yes. Sharp force injuries.
Those 18 sharp force injuries that we talked about?
Yes.
And what was the manner of death?
Homicide.
Is it typical, doctor, that you perform a toxicology test as well
Yes.
when you do an autopsy?
Yes.
What is the purpose of doing a toxicology report?
We do it in all violent deaths, and it's to determine whether there were any drugs or what drugs were in the system.
Was that performed on Gannon Stauch?
Yes.
Was there anything unusual detected in Gannon Stauch at the time of autopsy?
There were some drugs, or there was a drug that was present.
Okay, so let's talk first. Acetaminophen, a typical over-the-counter medication, was that found in Gannon?
Yes.
Would that be anything unusual that a child would have potentially residual acetaminophen at the time of autopsy?
If maybe the patient the decedent at that time was having a fever or pain, they would give them acetaminophen or Tylenol.
Would that be common though? In an 11-year-old to find that in a body potentially?
Not, you don't always see that.
Okay. What other things did you find in Gannon's bodily tissues?
He also had hydrocodone in the liver tissue.
All right, so let's talk about hydrocodone. What is hydrocodone?
Hydrocodone is a narcotic analgesic. It's a drug used for pain, and that is also found in cough medications because it's supposed to suppress your cough.
Is hydrocodone a controlled substance?
Yes, you need a prescription for that.
So I can't just go to Walgreens without a prescription and buy hydrocodone.
Yes.
Is it indicated as highly addictive?
Yes, you can be dependent on it.
What are the effects of hydrocodone on a human?
Depending on the dosage, you can initially become drowsy, lightheaded, dizziness. And if you take a higher dose, it could lead to respiratory depression, or you'll have problems breathing. You'll have lethargy, coma, and eventually death.
Was it unusual, in your opinion, to find hydrocodone in a child of 11 years old, like we did here in Gannon's death?
Yes, I found it unusual.
Is that because of all of those issues you just described?
Yes, and if it was for a cough, you would give something that didn't have the, narcotic analgesic in it.
Typically, people would not.
Yes, that wouldn't be the first line of choice.
Okay. May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Me.
Go ahead, doctor. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Ignacio.
Good morning.
My name is Will Cook, and I'm a defense attorney in this case. I'm going to ask some follow-up questions. Were you able to tell the blunt head trauma injuries, the three on the top of the head you were discussing? Can you tell the jury if those were post-mortem or pre-mortem?
They were pre-mortem.
Pre-mortem. And by that, you mean before death?
Yes.
Okay. At one point during your investigation, were you kind of unsure whether the blunt force trauma had happened before or after Gannon had died?
No.
Okay. And the injuries that you noted in your report and during the autopsy, they would indicate that this was a violent death.
Yes.
Okay. Also, it looked like a lot of the injuries, the blunt force injuries, the sharp force injuries, it looks like it was just a random act, whereas there's no pattern to it. You have injuries to the head, you have injuries to the body. Some are deep, some are shallow. It indicates that this was a random attack, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There was no pattern to it.
Yes.
Would the blood force injuries, were they fatal by themselves?
Yes, they could be.
Okay. And you say the gunshot was fatal in and of itself as well?
Yes.
Okay. Did the bullet from the gunshot, I can't remember what you said, did it enter into the cranial vault?
It did not.
It did not. Okay. And the mechanism for death with the gunshot, it was that it severed the spinal cord or some vertebrae?
Yes.
Okay. And what would have been the mechanism for death with the blood force injuries? Would that have been bleeding or hemorrhaging in the brain? What would that have been?
Yes, there was hemorrhage in the brain.
Okay. When you're doing investigation and autopsies and looking at toxicology reports, did you go back or did your office or did you receive any information about whether Gannon had had a prescription for cough syrup or cough medicine that contained any hydrocodone?
No, I didn't inquire.
Okay. So it is possible that he could have had a medication or a prescription from a doctor to assist with the cough.
It's possible.
Okay. And if he had had a prescription for a opiate-based cough syrup or cough medicine, then it would follow that it would show up in his blood or his toxicology results.
Yes.
Okay. Could any of the injuries noted have happened? There's evidence that there was a suitcase that he was in. He was, the suitcase was thrown off an overpass of a highway near Pensacola. Is there any way that some of the injuries could have been caused by the impact of the suitcase hitting the ground?
Like which injuries?
The blunt force trauma injuries,
No, they were on the top of the
the
head.
top of the head.
No.
Okay. In a lot of injuries, doctor, you'll see stippling or powder burns on the skin. where a bullet or a projectile will enter. Did you note any of that, any of those type of injuries on Mr. Gannon?
I didn't see any stippling, but
Okay.
it's also because of decomposition. I might not be able to see it.
And that was my next question. Would decomposition, even if it had originally been there, would it make that disappear or decay?
Maybe.
Maybe. So what I'm getting at is, were you able to make any type of conclusion as to the distance the gun was from the body when it was discharged?
No.
Okay. Were any of the sharp force injuries, were any of them in and of themselves fatal?
Because of the decomposition, I couldn't really tell. I mean, when I looked at the lungs, because I was thinking it would penetrate the lungs, I didn't see any injuries, but because there was decomposition, it was hard to see. So I couldn't really tell with the injuries that went into the chest cavity.
So I guess all you can say is it's possible. Is it possible that some or one or more of these sharp force injuries were fatal?
Yes, it could be fatal if left unattended.
Okay. And it looks like in your report, you look for organs, you remove some of them, you measure the contents of fluids in different organs and that sort of thing. It looks like in your report, it mentions that you couldn't find a pancreas. Is that because Gannon did not have a pancreas, or because it had just decayed to the point of being able to identify it?
Yes, decomposition.
Composition. So a lot of this stuff, a lot of the organs and whatnot in Gannon, they had decayed to the point where you couldn't identify him anymore.
Yes.
Okay. And is that typical for a body that had the history of exposure to the elements?
Yes.
Okay. Just a moment, doctor. Hang on. Oh, thank you.
Redirect.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Cook was just asking you some questions about the sharp force injuries. Do you remember those questions?
Yes.
And couldn't tell whether those could have been fatal on their own or not due to the decomposition.
Yes, but I think I said something I forgot. I couldn't tell, but then you could die from injuries into the chest cavity if left unattended.
Is that why you determined that the sharp force injuries were contributing factors to the death of Gannon Stauch?
Yes.
The fact that this body was put into a suitcase and thrown over a bridge, does that indicate to you that this was an attempt to hide this type of evidence, the evidence that we're finding from these injuries?
I think if you can lay a little bit of foundation about what expertise you might have in that regard.
Okay.
Let's try that first.
Yeah, sure. So doctor, when we're talking about investigations into deaths of persons, especially I guess in Florida where there's lots of waterways and that kind of thing, is it common to find bodies that have been disposed of into waterways or bayous or marshy areas in Florida?
Yes, we have had some deaths.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have had some deaths found in bodies of water.
Is it typical in your expertise to find that a person may have been murdered in one place and then intentionally moved to another place like a waterway or bayou or marshy area to make it harder for authorities to find and examine the body?
Yes.
Okay. Was that apparent in this case? That a
Yes.
body had been moved some distance in mileage and then pitched over a bridge into a potentially marshy and watery area?
Yes.
And so does the fact that that occurred here indicate to you, in your expert opinion, that there was also the attempt to hide this body from authorities, so it wouldn't be detected and examined to determine how this person died.
Yes,
Is that an intentional act?
yes,
I would object.
Overruled.
You were asked by Mr. Cook about stippling, so let's talk and so the jury understands what stippling is. Is stippling essentially powder burns on the surface of skin that would be caused by somebody shooting a gun at somebody in close proximity to that skin?
yes, usually 2 inches to 2 feet from the skin. The gun would be 2 inches to 2 feet from the body. And so you would see the gunpowder leave marks, little pinpoint marks on the skin.
These powder burns, are these expelled out of the barrel of the firearm when it's fired?
Yes,
If somebody put a pillow between the gun and the victim, would that prevent stippling from appearing on skin?
yes,
Did you, in your autopsy, also include a pillow and x-rays and find 2 bullets inside of that pillow?
yes,
Mr. Cook started out by asking you about if these sharp force injuries and the blunt force injuries, if these appeared to be random acts. And I want to be clear, do you mean that these were just randomly happened to Gannon without somebody intentionally causing these injuries?
can you repeat?
Yeah. Well, were these random injuries or did somebody intentionally cause these injuries to Gannon?
Oh, it was intentional.
Okay, so when we say the word random, when Mr. Cook was asking you that, you don't mean that these were randomly happening with no rhyme or reason as to who or might be causing these injuries?
Yes, because he said there was no pattern, so I said there's no pattern.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to drive towards. These were intentional acts, as you just testified to. They did, though, target specific areas of Gannon's body, correct? It's not like these were injuries to his lower legs or toes or feet, correct?
Yes,
And so were these targeted towards upper body area, head area, chest area?
yes,
Does that indicate a person had an intentional desire to cause potentially fatal injuries to Gannon
yes,
because of where they're targeting?
yes,
Is it more fatal to cause somebody an injury to their lower leg or to their head?
more to the head.
Okay. And Gannon had lots of injuries to his head, is that right?
Yes,
In all of these injuries, are these all the injuries that you talked about? 18 sharp force injuries, 4 blunt force injuries, and a gunshot wound to the chin that ultimately killed Gannon. Are all these pre-mortem injuries, meaning they happened while Gannon was still alive?
yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Dr. Ignacio? Looks like we have a few. Counsel, retrieve those and approach, please. Sorry. Dr. Ignacio, can you determine how long the body has been decomposing? Do you know when the time of death was?
No,
And Dr. Ignacio, during the autopsy, was there evidence of any burns on the arms, burn marks, or bubbling of the skin?
I couldn't see that because of the decomposition.
And how long does Tylenol and hydrocodone stay detectable in the body?
Um, Usually 12 hours after the body would already metabolize the drug and come out in the urine. So that the drug was already there at the time of death.
All right. I will allow reasonable follow-up as to those questions only. Mr. Allen?
So Dr. Ignacio, just so we're clear, when you say 12 hours for those things to metabolize in the body, if it hasn't completely, like the hydrocodone, had not completely metabolized and been expelled by the body, even if it's been an extended period of time, like in this case, you would still detect hydrocodone.
Yes, if you were alive and you would take hydrocodone, after 12 hours, we don't even test for drugs anymore because it's going to be out of the system. But when he died at that time, he had the hydrocodone. It was even able to metabolize because it converted to hydromorphone. So there's some time there, but the drug was still there because he died around that time.
When you say that the hydrocodone had started to metabolize, so that means, does that mean that the body has processed some of that hydrocodone, but not all of it at the time of death?
Yes, maybe before he died and he was attacked.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you. Doctor, when you were talking about the burning or bubbling of the skin, so there could have been burn marks or burn injuries on the arms, but due to decomposition, you would not be able to detect those any longer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you get a sample to test for drugs, as in the case with Gannon here, where are you getting the sample from? Or is there still urine that can be captured from the bladder? I know they do that a lot of times in these toxicology tests. Or just tell the jury where you got these samples from.
Since he didn't have any more blood, it was all fluids, body fluids. We couldn't test that, so we take liver. So these levels are from the liver tissue.
Okay. And a lot of times in these types of investigations, you have a blood level and a urine level. And I've heard testimony before that a urine levels, they're not as accurate about time of ingestion and everything, and it's mostly byproducts. Would the samples that you got from the liver, would that be considered a blood level or a urine level test?
It's a liver tissue level.
Liver tissue level, okay. Which would indicate if it was to the liver, there had been some metabolism of the drugs that had already taken place by the body.
Yes, it was recovered in the liver.
Okay. Did you attempt to get samples from anywhere else?
Can't recall. I think
If you have your report, would that refresh your recollection?
we took liver tissue and spleen tissue, but they tested the liver.
Okay. And what is the significance, I'm sorry, of taking samples from the liver versus the spleen?
If we can't take from blood or urine, we take from the liver.
Okay.
So you can see there will be drugs in the liver too, and there might be levels for that. But with this case, because of the decomposition, it's hard to determine the values.
Okay. And I guess I asked a bad question and I apologize. When you're taking a sample from the spleen, why take it from the spleen as well as the liver?
Because you could also have drugs in the spleen. Blood flows through the spleen.
Okay. And would you expect to have the same results with a liver sample versus a spleen sample, or could there be differences?
it could be different.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
All right, thank you, Doctor. You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take our morning recess at this point in time. Again, do not discuss the case among yourselves. Do not discuss the case with anyone else. And if we can have everyone back in the jury room at, say, 10:25, we should be able to start on time at that point. All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record should reflect the jury has left the courtroom. Is there anything we need to take up outside the presence of the jury, prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. Court will be in recess. Thank you.
All rise.
All right. So that first witness for this week was Susan Ignacio, and she's the associate medical examiner in Florida that performed Gannon's autopsy on March 18th, 2020. Autopsy photos were showing the true extent of how badly the body had decomposed. And his right hand showed bones. She pointed out multiple stab wounds on his chest and rib area, his left armpit, left wrist, left upper arm, left hand. The back of his right hand had 4 wounds. He had one on his right ring finger. Gannon clearly had tried fighting back using his hands as his guards. And so on his left upper back, he had a much deeper sharp wound that fractured a rib. His left shoulder had a sharp injury that went about 4 inches deep. Dr. Ignacio also showed multiple head injuries caused by a blunt object, as well as a sharp one. She also described a gunshot wound in the left jaw. So in total, there was 18 sharp force injuries, 4 blunt force lacerations, and 1 gunshot wound through the chin. Unbelievable. The doctor believes that the order of events was the sharp force injuries first, and then it was either the gunshot or the blunt injuries that came next, but she was unsure of the order. I think common sense probably tells us it was the blunt force trauma to his head that was second after the sharp stab wounds, and then the gunshot wound was most likely the last one. But because on the autopsy, she could not tell what came first. Angels among us, she has 2 attorneys. Also in Gannon's system, hydrocodone was found. And I was thinking when she was talking about it, because hydrocodone, I'm not sure why it was prescribed, if it was even prescribed to him, but there was way more in his system than the medical examiner would ever expect to be, a normal level. And so I was thinking when she was talking about that, that drowsy effect that the hydrocodone would cause very possibly could be why when in that CCTV footage of the neighbor, and we see Gannon walk out to the truck, how sluggishly he went out there. So it appears that she probably gave him the hydrocodone that morning and thinking it would be easier to get rid of him, if thinking he couldn't fight back, he was going to be too sluggish. But Gannon literally fought for his life. And the last thing she said of much importance was that due to the decomposition of his body, she was really unable to tell if he had any burns, as Leticia has said. So we don't know that. And then the court's just in a morning break for about 10-15 minutes. I don't know if you guys saw, I didn't catch it, but I watched Plunder this morning on YouTube. And I'm going to play just a brief clip of that. And this was from this past Friday. And as Leticia was waiting for the jury and the jury was walking in, apparently Leticia gave a devil horn sign with her right hand. So I went back and watched it on my video. I couldn't really catch it. I could catch, she puts up her hand, but I couldn't see clearly enough. But Plunder's video does seem to show it. And I will put the link to Plunder's video here in the comments for you. So if you haven't yet seen her video, please go watch the full one. But I just want to play this little short clip because it was the best I could find that shows what Leticia did this past Friday. All right. Plunder's link for this video is in the comments. And let me play this real fast.
All rise for the jury, please. And that's okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Why did you tell your husband she wants me to lie and say I saw Gannon leave in a car with a van?
Because that's what she wanted me to.
Wants me to lie and say I saw Gannon leave in a car.
So
with
let's
a
go
man.
back.
Because that's
one more time.
what she wanted me to
And
do.
everyone is talking.
Jeez. That's what it looks like to me too.
Yeah.
So this was last Friday morning when they first came into court.
Yeah,
She is freaking nuts.
Why did you tell your husband she wants me to lie?
She's just nuts. It looks like they're feeding her pretty good in jail, though. Yeah, she is, Angels. Had you guys caught that before, though? It's crazy. So I wonder what other witnesses we're going to have today. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm just like everybody else. I'm very, very, very anxious to hear what Harley has to say. And I guess she's a witness for both the defense and the prosecution. So that should get really interesting. But her testimony is definitely probably the one I cannot wait to hear. All right. They have about 10 minutes of a break. I say go grab a drink, a snack, and we will come back here in just about 5 minutes. I'll keep it running. And I truly appreciate you guys being here again. Angels, I think that they cut a deal with her as well. From what we've heard, it just doesn't seem like, how did she not know something? She had to have. How did she not smell something? I mean, that alone. And I still wonder how Leticia was able to get that huge suitcase we saw last week up and over the guardrails on that bridge. You know, she's not that strong. So, I mean, maybe she did do it by herself. But I have no doubt in my mind, in my opinion, that Harley definitely had knowledge. And they very well may have cut her a deal. Let me try to go back to the girl that worked with her from last week. And play a portion of that. Hi, Sam. Thanks so much. You did. The coroner that did Gannon's autopsy results was the morning's witness, and they've gone to break now. And she's done testifying, but they showed his autopsy photos. And he had in total 18 sharp force injuries, 4 blunt force lacerations, and 1 gunshot wound through his chin. And so that that coroner believes that he was stabbed those 18 times, and it's my assumption, you know, that didn't work. So then she went on to the blunt force trauma to his head, and that didn't work. And so then she shot him, and she said he would have had to been shot, I believe she said from between 2 and 2 feet, 2 feet, maybe 2 and 4 feet from him when he was shot. And also, Sam, that they found hydrocodone in his body. And it's very possible, she didn't say this, but he had more hydrocodone in his system than what should be normal for any 11-year-old. And she went over the effect of hydrocodone on a body. And of course, one of those is, you know, drowsiness. And so I had said, you know, I feel like, you know, when we saw that CCTV footage from the neighbor, and he walked so, you know, sluggishly to her truck, that she had probably given him that hydrocodone, you know, before that, thinking she would basically kind of knock him out with it. And that didn't really work. So also, she was unable to tell if he had any burns because his body was so severely decomposed. He fought back really hard. He had so many injuries on his left side, his hands, his finger, his ribs, his chest, his shoulder. Those were all stab wounds. So I was trying to find from last Friday when, excuse me, the girl that worked with Harley and her testimony while we're waiting on them just to come back from break. Yeah, it appears she did drug him, Sam.
Was more social.
Would you say she had a positive personality or a negative personality?
So this is Janine Sanchez from last Friday, and she worked with Harley at Massage MV. They also attended Bible studies together, but they weren't really friends outside of that.
Positive.
Bubbly or angry?
Bubbly.
Was she nice to people or mean to people?
She was nice.
And then how would she interact with customers that would come into Massage Envy?
She was really nice to them.
Was she professional also?
Yes.
Had you ever been over to her house?
No.
Prior to a specific time that we're going to get to in just a moment, did you ever have an occasion to meet any of her family members?
No.
At some point, did you become aware that her younger brother was missing?
Yes.
I'm not asking you for what was said, but did you actually get a text from Harley regarding that specific incident?
Yes.
Do you remember working with her on Wednesday, January 29th?
It was a long time ago, so I don't remember exact dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to help you orient yourself, and it makes perfect sense. It's over 3 years ago. We've had previous testimony that Gannon went missing on January 27th, which was a Monday. And then, did you talk to a detective in this case?
Yes.
Do you remember talking about the last time you might have worked with Harley with that detective?
Yes.
Okay. And if I showed you that report, would that help you remember what day that was you were referencing last seeing Harley?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, may I approach the witness?
You may.
In Sanchez, I'm showing you a police report. I want you to look at this last paragraph on the page and read through it and then tell me when you're done.
This.
That paragraph, yes.
Yes.
Did that refresh your memory as to the last time you had worked with Harley?
Yes.
What day was that?
The 29th.
Was that Wednesday, January 29th?
Yes.
What was, again, not asking you for any statements that Harley made to you, but what was Harley's demeanor like on that day?
She was a little frantic. Just not her usual self.
Do you remember her telling the detective whether she was crying or not?
Yes.
And was she crying?
Sam, I think that was when I recorded it live last Friday. I think I was having issues that day, and so it's just in the original video. Sorry about that. But court is back from their morning recess. We're waiting to see who they are going to call as the second witness of the
All
day.
rise for the jury, please.
The jury's just come back into the courtroom.
Thank you. May all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358 versus Leticia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we would recall Al Stauch.
All right, Mr. Stauch, if you would resume your seat in the witness stand, I will invite you that you're still under oath.
Oh, wow. So we're going to hear from Al again.
May I proceed, Your Honor? I don't know if there was something.
You may,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Stauch. How are you doing today?
Morning.
When you were previously on the stand, we talked with you about your woodworking. We saw some of the photos in the garage of that woodworking. Did you at one point suffer an injury as a result of your woodworking?
I did, yes, sir.
What was that injury?
I cut off the tip of my right pointer finger,
Your index finger?
my index finger, yes, sir.
When did that occur?
May of 2019, around that time frame.
Did you get any prescription medications to deal with pain from that injury?
I did.
What kind of prescriptions did you get?
I believe I would have, well, I had a ibuprofen prescription and then some sort of pain medicine, I think hydrocodone, some sort.
Was that hydrocodone, was that a prescription that you got from your doctor?
Yes, sir, directly related to the finger injury.
Where did you typically keep that hydrocodone in the house?
That one I typically, and the ibuprofen I kept next to my bed in my little nightstand type area.
Did you consume all of the hydrocodone when you had that prescription?
I did not. I believe I only took one or two of the pills. I don't take a lot of prescription medicine anyways, and the ibuprofen was enough for me to manage the pain.
Did you ever, did you or anybody else in the family prior to when Gannon went missing, would you ever give these hydrocodone pills to any of the kids in the family?
No, they were hidden in the drawer in that nightstand area. So only myself and possibly the defendant knew where they were.
Would you have ever given those to Gannon?
No, sir.
That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Cross-examination. No questions. Do the jurors have any questions regarding that part of Mr. Stauch's testimony? All right, thank you, sir. You may step down.
Oh, wow. So that prescription for hydrocodone was not even
All
Gannon's.
right,
that was
prosecution, call your next
Al's.
witness, please.
I wonder how
Just
much.
checking in the hallway to see if she's out here yet. Judge.
Okay.
I wonder how much, if any, of that hydrocodone was recovered, because Al just said he only took a couple. If they never recovered the remainders, then she gave him quite a bit, and the coroner just corroborated that by saying he had too many. He had way too high of a level of hydrocodone in his system.
At this time, we would call Special Agent Andrew Cohen.
So she really tried to use 4 weapons on him, in my opinion.
All right. Agent Cohen, if you would step forward and raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
Good morning, Mr. Cohen. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Andrew Cohen, Cohen. I'm a special agent for the FBI.
How long have you been with the FBI?
Since 2014.
What are your duties with the FBI?
I'm assigned to a violent crime task force. I primarily investigate criminal enterprises, complex narcotics investigations, fugitive work, and other violations of federal law.
At some point, did you get involved with the investigation into the disappearance of Gannon Stauch?
I did.
What was your role and how did you get involved in that investigation?
I was requested to assist the El Paso County Sheriff's Office shortly after Gannon was reported missing. My role at the FBI was the lead case agent for the FBI. So information that we obtained from search warrants or interviews or other data would be compiled and would eventually all come through me.
The fact that the investigation spanned from Colorado through to Florida and then South Carolina, did having the FBI on board assist with that investigation and just the spread of the investigation?
It certainly did. The FBI has a lot of resources nationwide, and it's sometimes a little less complex for the FBI to arrange resources in other states than, say, it would be for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office locally.
When you said that you were the lead agent, what does that mean for the FBI to have a lead agent on a case?
I was assigned the responsibilities of that case, of maintaining the case file and of making the investigative decisions at the FBI.
Are you also serving as an advisory witness in this case?
Yes, I am.
Is that why you're sitting sort of behind us in during testimony here?
That's correct.
Is it probable that you'll testify more than one time?
I think that's up to you.
Yes, it is. So, Agent Cohen, in your work as an FBI agent, is it typical for you to get involved in wiretaps?
I've been involved in several wiretap investigations throughout my career.
What does it mean to have a wiretap?
A wiretap, common language, is actually the interception of oral or electronic or wire communication. In essence, we're able to listen to phone calls or to view text messages as they're sent.
Tell the jury what the process is to gain access to listening to those types of things.
A wiretap is considered a very intrusive any investigation, or even at the start of any investigation. Quite frankly, it's the most intrusive technique law enforcement has, where we're listening to somebody's phone call in a scenario where you would think you'd have the highest expectation of privacy, talking on your phone in your own private setting. And not only are we receiving the communications of the person whose phone we've installed the wiretap on, but we're also intercepting communications of other people that would be in contact with that person. So in order to get a wiretap, it's a pretty lengthy process. We have to show to the court that there has been an exhaustion of all other techniques that could be used in investigation, and that other techniques wouldn't be effective. So in this particular investigation, we had done multiple search warrants. We had done GPS trackers on cars. We had done location on cell phones. We had done physical surveillance. We had conducted interviews. And we have to demonstrate not only to the court that this is a necessary technique and that it would be reasonable that we would collect evidence, but we also have to show that all that other stuff would no longer be effective in the investigation.
What would happen if you've got the wiretap set up, you've got the approval of the judge, and you start to hear something that is outside the scope of the investigation? What would somebody listening to the wiretap do?
Well, earlier I told you that the privacy of individuals is so important. And if we were listening to a wiretap, we have a set of instructions called minimization instructions that come with every wiretap. And part of those instructions, it tells investigators a certain set of rules that if we were to listen to things that weren't relevant to the investigation, that we can't really do that. We'd have to pause the listening for a certain period of time, and then we could pick it back up. Say it could be 30 seconds or a minute, but we'd pause that and then pick back up to see how the conversation was progressing.
Does that protect the information that you're gathering so that it's really only case-specific information as opposed to extraneous or other private information that might be discussed in other types of phone calls?
That's correct.
Was a wiretap method used in this particular investigation?
Yes, it was.
During the process of you being involved in obtaining wiretap authorization from a court, in your knowledge of the case, was it apparent that this particular defendant was switching the way that the person was communicating, meaning phone numbers or devices, that type of thing.
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
Well, the defendant in this case had her original phone seized by law enforcement shortly after she reported Gannon to be missing. After that, she decided she was going to leave the state of Colorado, and she purchased a new phone at a Walmart with a different area code under a name of a person who may or may not really exist, but certainly wasn't her.
Was that purchase made in Trinidad, Colorado?
Yes, it was.
And then do you know this because of listening in on the wiretaps and seeing what numbers are being used, but also because of another investigative method that was being used in this case as well?
We had other investigative methods being used too. We had done search warrants for financial records for the defendant, and we found that one of those financial records was a purchase at a Walmart in Trinidad. Some further investigation led us to the purchase of that telephone.
And then we had Mr. Stauch on the stand the first day of testimony in this case, and we listened to some recorded phone calls, which I think we've articulated as pretextual phone calls. Is that another method that you were able to obtain that information that the defendant was using other phone numbers beyond the first phone that was seized by law enforcement?
Yes, it was. One of the common things that I've seen in my training experience as an FBI agent is that people who are involved in criminal activity oftentimes will change phone numbers or will download Wi-Fi only calling applications that allow them to have different phone numbers frequently, and it's mainly to avoid the detection of law enforcement.
Is that an intentional act by somebody that is being investigated?
Those applications don't self-install on a phone. Cell phones don't just show up in your car. So yes, those are all very intentional acts.
Okay. And then as you're doing these wiretap investigations or methods, are those phone calls actually recorded so you can listen to them later?
Yes, they are.
Is that what occurred in this case, that wiretap conversations were recorded that captured the defendant's voice?
They were.
Did you have actual physical contact with this particular defendant?
Yes, I did.
Were you familiar with her voice?
Yes, I was.
The person that you had physical contact with and you know as the defendant, is she present in the courtroom today?
She certainly is.
Will you identify her by where she is sitting and what she is wearing?
She's seated at the defense table. She's wearing a pink shirt and has long dark hair and currently has her hand on her chin.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect. Go ahead.
And how did you become familiar with the defendant's voice?
Through several aspects. I had reviewed body cam footage from when deputies originally responded to the defendant's home. I had listened to other phone calls she was involved in. I saw the defendant give interviews on the news, and ultimately I was present for her arrest.
And the pretextual phone calls that you were participating in, and then these wiretap phone calls that you were able to intercept, are all of those voices that are caught in these recordings the defendant's voice?
Yes, they are.
I may approach with 688, 689, 690, and 691.
You may.
Special Agent Cohen, I've got in my hands people exhibit 688. It's a disc. Do you recognize it?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I reviewed this disc and I initialed the disc.
What does the disc contain?
This contains wiretap calls, recorded wiretap calls.
Does it indicate a time and date of this particular call?
This particular call is February 18th, 2020 at 10:14 in the morning.
The file that this disc contains, is it a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
As it relates to 689, do you recognize this disc?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disc.
And what does this disc contain?
This contains a recorded phone call from the wiretap on February 18th, 2020 at 10:19 in the morning.
is this file on this disk, is a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
And then looking at 690, you recognize this disk.
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disk.
And what does this disk contain?
This contains a recorded wiretap call on February 18th, 2020 at 11:16 in the morning.
Does this file on this disk, is it a fair and accurate representation of that particular phone call?
Yes, it is.
And then looking at 691, do you recognize this disk?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
I've also initialed this disk.
What does this disk contain?
A recorded wiretap call on February 18th, 2020 at 2:47 in the afternoon.
Does it actually say 1447?
It does.
And that's 2:47 PM.
Correct.
Is this file on this disk, is a fair and accurate representation of that particular call?
Yes, it is.
All right, this time I've moved for admission of 688, 689, 690, and 691.
Mr. Tellini?
Your Honor, subject to the objection I had at the prior hearing.
Council approach, please. All right, subject to the objection, the exhibits 688, 89, 90, and 91 are admitted. Go ahead.
And permission to publish, starting with 688, Judge.
You may.
Sounds like we're going to hear more phone calls.
And how can I help?
Yes, I didn't get any confirmation about my test I paid for.
And so just for reference sake, before we get too deep into the phone call, sounds like there's two voices.
That's correct.
Do you recognize one of the voices?
I do.
Is it the female voice?
Yes.
And whose voice is that?
That's the defendant's voice.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Angela.
Okay, can I have your name, please? I can check if we've got the order here.
Yes. Keisha, last name is Stauch, Stagch.
Okay, give me one moment, please. Let me have a little look.
This is about
Okay,
that
yeah,
fake
perfect.
lie
I can see that
detector
we've
thing.
received that, and we have actually sent the test. Have you not received that yet?
Have what now?
We have already sent the results to your email account.
I don't have them. Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay, let me try resending that, and if you don't receive it, give us a call back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, now. Bye-bye.
So Special Agent Cohen, the phone number that, at the very beginning, let me back up. There, you can hear ringing. Does that indicate that this is a phone call that was initiated by the defendant to a particular place?
That's correct.
Were you able to investigate and determine who it was that she was calling?
I was.
What was the phone number that she was calling?
Objection, foundation.
Mr. Allen?
I can lay some foundation, Judge. When a wiretap is obtained, does it record both the outgoing and receiving phone numbers?
As part of the overall wiretap in this investigation, we also installed something called a pen register trap and trace device. That particular device will record both the outgoing or incoming phone number from the subject telephone.
And so does that mean that the receiving phone, the person that is being dialed or place that the originator is dialing, would be caught in this trap and trace?
That's correct. It's identified as either an outgoing or incoming phone call, and we have the telephone numbers on both ends of that conversation.
And then were you able to look up that particular phone number that was dialed for this call and see it being associated with a particular web page?
Yes, I was.
What web page was that?
Fakepolygraph.com.
Okay. And is that what all of these phone calls are in relation to, is calls originated by the defendant to a purportedly fake polygraph.com webpage.
That's correct.
Okay, let's jump into 689 and permission to publish 689, Judge.
You may go ahead.
May I help?
Hi, yes, I was just talking to you. Is there a way you confirm where you sent those? Because I still didn't get them.
Yeah, so I'm just going to get that resent for you. So if you wait for the next sort of 10, 15 minutes and let me know if you haven't received it by then.
I was saying, can you check the email, because I just want to make sure.
Okay, yeah, give me a moment. Spelled TECIALYNN2006 @yahoo.com.
Okay, cool. So you said
Okay.
like 10, 15 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
In that particular phone call, did it sound like there was an email address that was confirmed to the defendant?
Yes.
What was that email address?
It was Tisha Lynn at 2000. I can't remember the exact address, but it was an address that we knew to be associated to the defendant.
Okay, and that's what sounds like an English speaking person relayed, and then the defendant acknowledged that as being the correct email address.
That's correct.
Okay, and then 690, permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may go ahead.
Hello, how can I help?
Hi, yes, I'm calling again. I still didn't get that email.
Okay, can I ask your name, please?
It's last name Stauch, S-T-A.
Right, yes, perfect. I can see here.
You told me 10, 15 minutes, and you said it again. I still don't have it.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's actually been blocked by management, this order, due to the content of the questions, so we're not going to be able to send this report.
Okay, so do I get my money back?
Unfortunately, not on this case, no. Obviously, due to our terms and conditions, it does clearly state that any sort of illegal activities or anything like that, obviously the management do reserve the right not to send the report. Obviously, we do incur processing fees, so that's why a refund wouldn't be due.
So what do you do now? Just delete it and go on about life and keep money?
Yes, we would do indeed.
I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
In that particular call, is it essentially being communicated that a polygraph result is not going to be provided because it's associated with illegal activity?
It's a leading and further the jury is heard only on their own determination.
Sustained on second grounds, jury can make their own determination.
Okay, and then permission to publish 691.
You may go ahead.
That's pretty bad when you're blocked to fakepolygraph.com.
Hi, how can I help?
Hi, did it hang up?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I can hear you now. How can I help you?
Okay. I talked to you earlier and you said that the request I did was blocked or something, but I looked on the terms and conditions and it says you can't say things about like infidelity and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how that was blocked.
So that again, sorry, that you can or can't?
No, okay, so I did a report earlier and you said you would send it to me, but when I called back, you said it was blocked, that I wasn't allowed to get the report. But then I clicked the terms and conditions and it says you can do questions about infidelity and stuff like that.
Yes, infidelity you can, correct.
Right, and that's what I did.
Your report was about infidelity, was it?
What did you say?
So you're saying your report was about infidelity?
Yeah, like I put questions in for it and you had to put like answers. And you said something about it being blocked.
Yeah, so what were your questions?
So it was about during the time that we were away inside of in another state that I talked to, and I gave the person's individual's name, Ortega. That was one of them. Then it said, "Are your eyes blue?" And I did a couple of the questions that were on the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure in that case. Unfortunately, that's not what came through. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happened there then.
Because I read that you can do this. Yeah, it says on there that you can do that.
Yeah, you would be able to about infidelity, but the questions that were submitted for your order were not to do with infidelity.
Yeah, I didn't submit questions that were not to do with infidelity.
Okay. All right. See, well, I'll have to look into that then in that case.
Do you want me just to write you the questions down?
No, it's okay. I'll just need to have a look into this then to see what can be done.
Okay.
Just remind me again, what was the name on the report?
It was Stauch, Stauch.
And that's your surname, is it? Your last name?
Yes.
Okay. And the first name is?
Tecia.
Okay. And how do I spell that?
It's Tecia.
Tecia.
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Well, let me have a look into that and I can come back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the best number to get you on?
843
Mm-hmm.
798 1700.
Okay. Right. Thanks a lot now. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Special Agent Cohen, these phone calls are from February 18th, as you've testified. Were you aware also at this same time that that's when these pretext calls were being recorded involving Al Stauch and the defendant?
Yes, I was.
Were there phone calls during that time with those pretext calls in which the defendant was talking about getting a polygraph examination?
Yes, she was.
What was she trying to convince the listener, I guess Al Stauch, of during those conversations?
Objection, speculation as to.
Sustained. I think you can rephrase and refer back to the conversation, but I think it's up to the jury to make a determination about what the defendant's state of mind was during the conversation.
Sure, I understand, Judge. What was she saying to Al as it relates to the polygraph?
She was saying that she had passed a polygraph test and she was continuing to prove her innocence and that she had nothing to do with Gannon's disappearance.
Passed a polygraph as it relates to what?
Whether she had anything to do with Gannon's disappearance.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Tellini.
I don't have any questions for Agent Cohen at this point.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Agent Cohen? Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
We would call Christina Cervantez.
Last name again?
Cervantez.
Cervantez.
Yep, it's spelled Cerva.
Sorry, I need to write faster, don't I? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Your Honor. Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Christina Cervantez, Christina. Last name Cer, V as in Victor, A-N as in Nora, T as in Tom, E as in Edward, Z as in zebra.
Do you need a glass of water?
Yes, please.
There's a water pitcher there.
And be careful when you unscrew the lid because it comes out fast when you do that.
You have to turn it just a quarter turn roughly, I think. It happens to all of us. Don't worry about it. What is your current occupation?
My current occupation is crime lab specialist with the Texas Department of Public Safety in Texas.
Did you used to work for the sheriff's office here in El Paso County?
Correct.
What was your occupation with this sheriff's office?
Evidence technician.
What were your duties associated with being an evidence technician?
My duties were to intake evidence as it was collected from the scenes, from the officers as well. We also responded to calls when we had evidence to collect from those scenes. We also received phone calls from the public in reference to getting their property back.
And what were your dates of employment with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office?
I was employed with El Paso County Sheriff's Office from 2015, and I believe that was August of 2015 to January of 2022.
Okay. Were you working in January, February timeframe of 2020 for the sheriff's office
That is correct.
in that same evidence technician role?
Correct.
You mentioned that sometimes you would get calls from people in the public. What were those calls typically in relation to?
Typically, they were the public wanting their property back. Anytime we had evidence collected, the person would call oftentimes and ask for their property to be returned to them.
Would that happen fairly regularly?
Yes, sir.
And when they're asking for property to be released back to them, is this property that might be held for either a criminal investigation or even a civil matter?
That is correct.
What would be the, I guess, the protocol on a civil matter if there's some property that's held by the sheriff's office and it's a civil issue?
So if it's property that is held within a civil matter, usually we would have to get authorizations from the detectives in charge, letting us know what we could release, what we couldn't. Oftentimes, if there was an authorization from the court stating, hey, you can release this, it usually was signed by a judge, we could release it that way as well. But we always have to have that authorization in place before we could release it.
What was the protocol in place as it relates to any evidence or property that's held on a criminal matter?
On a criminal matter, usually until the case was completed and we got the proper authorizations, till those were received, we could not release it until that time.
Okay. As it relates to this time frame, do you remember working on February 12th, 2020? And I know this is over 3 years away, but do you remember working at that time at the sheriff's office as an evidence tech?
Yes.
Do you remember getting phone calls as it relates to the Gannon Stauch / Leticia Stauch investigation?
Yes.
What were the nature of those phone calls that you were receiving in the evidence area for the sheriff's office?
So the nature of the phone calls could range from callers calling in saying they would like certain items of evidence back. From what I can recall, on several occasions, I had received phone calls in reference to property belonging to Mrs. Stauch.
Okay, so just so that we're all understanding, did you receive some calls in which the caller identified themselves as Letecia Stauch?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So had you had a chance to hear Leticia Stauch's voice prior to these phone calls coming in?
At one point, I did. I do recall her coming into the lobby area at one point.
Okay. So what do you remember about that particular occasion?
I just remember her coming in and asking for her property back. And at that time, I told her I did need to get in contact with the lead investigator to make sure it was something that we could, in fact, release to her.
Okay. So you had a direct person-to-person interaction with her.
That is correct.
Did you hear her voice during that interaction?
Yes.
And do you see that same person here in the courtroom?
Yes.
Will you identify her for the jury, pointing to where she's sitting, and describe her clothing?
She is wearing a pink sweater, dark hair, long dark hair.
Your Honor, ask that the record reflect she's identified the defendant.
Record will so reflect. Go ahead.
And then did you get phone calls after that interaction with that same voice from the defendant?
Yes.
In a particular phone call, did you get a phone call from that defendant where she purported to be somebody different?
From what I can recall, yes.
Do you remember who it was that she was purporting to be at that time?
At that time, when I first got that call, the voice, it sounded like her, but claiming to be her daughter.
Okay. And when we were using the word her there, you mean her, the defendant?
Correct.
The voice sounded like the defendant, but was claiming to be her daughter?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 280?
You may.
Showing you what's marked as People's Exhibit 280. Is this a recording of that phone call that occurred on February 12th, 2020?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that phone call?
Yes.
Okay. Move for admission of People's Exhibit 280.
Commissioner Board Item?
On the exhibit?
Yes.
Yes.
So somebody called and they identified themselves as Harley Hunt.
Correct.
Have you ever spoken in person to Ms. Hunt?
Before?
Yes, before the phone call.
Yes. If what I can recall from 3 years ago, I remember her coming into the lobby area.
Ms. Stauch or her daughter?
Mrs. Stauch.
Okay. Had you ever spoken to her daughter in person?
No.
So you don't have a foundation as what her daughter's voice sounded like
No.
and how much her daughter's voice may sound like hers?
No, sir.
I'd object to the foundation.
Overruled. I think it goes to weight, not admissibility. You can
So-
go ahead and publish.
Okay, so I had moved for admit, and I think you just need to formally admit it into evidence, Judge.
Exhibit 280 will be admitted.
Okay, and then permission to publish this particular recording.
You may go ahead.
Office evidence, this is Chris. Yes, I was
So that first voice that we hear, is that your voice?
Correct.
And then that second voice, whose voice is that? Based on your knowledge,
Based on my knowledge, Mrs. Stauch's.
the defendant.
Correct.
Okay.
earlier. I think you might have been busy or something, so I waited to call back for a little bit. It's okay. Sorry. What time did you call? I just called you like maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, and you said, hold on. No, that wasn't, there's 4 of us working here, so that wasn't me. Yeah. I'm like, I don't recognize your voice. You were busy. Okay, so I'm trying to find out about some contents of mine that was in the car. So my book bag, which had a lot of my social security card, birth certificates and stuff that was in a car that's still impounded. And I just want to know, they gave me the purse one day out of it, but how can I get the book bag? And I need my MacBook for school. Your MacBook, okay. What is your name? Harley Hunt. Harley Hunt. And do you have a case number so I can look it up? Let's see this. I have this paper. It says agency number. Is that it? Or I have a VIN number? It should be agency. Agency number? All right. 2020 1382.
All right. Let's take a look here. Sure. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you. You said it's a book bag?
There's a black and white book bag that was in the back seat of the white Jetta. And it has like my passport, my social, my birth certificate, my dog paperwork, my MacBook.
Let's see. Let's see.
Yeah, there was like there was a one blue bag that had a MacBook in it. And then there was a black and white book bag, and there was like my diamond rings are in it. And then there was a pink folder that had like my birth certificate and all that in it.
Okay. Let's see here.
Like, I understand they might still be holding the car, but like I can't like even like work or anything without having my passport because I'm a flight attendant. And
Okay. And you said your name was Carly Hunt, is that correct?
Harley Hunt.
Harley Hunt. Okay, Harley. Well, I can tell you right now, everything on this case is evidence. So because it's evidence, I cannot release it back to you without written authorization from basically a higher authority. They have not given us any written authorizations to release. So unfortunately, what you may want to do is contact the detective on this case. Have you been in contact with anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let me go ahead and get the lead detective's number for you, and you can call them in reference to this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hold on just one second.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Harley? Yeah. Okay, so that's going to be Detective Bethel. Okay. And her desk number is going to be 520-7291.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Bye.
Ms. Cervantez, did it seem odd to you also, the comment about being a flight attendant?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Yeah, did it seem odd to you when the caller requesting the information back, I guess, relayed to you that they were a flight attendant?
Yes.
Overruled.
What was odd about that?
Just the fact that her daughter being young, the age, I thought I found it odd to be that age and a flight attendant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Cross-examination?
No question.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Ms. Cervantes? No? All right. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
Called Detective Michael Bauman.
Detective, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
Good morning, Detective. Will you please introduce yourself to our jury and then spell your name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Michael Bauman, Bauman,
Detective, who are you employed by?
the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
What do you do for the sheriff's office?
I'm a digital forensics detective.
What are your duties associated with that position?
Basically, my job is to find and preserve data that may be evidentiary of nature on electronic devices.
What kind of electronic devices do you typically work with?
Computers, cell phones, DVRs, things like that.
And then is there a particular device that helps you get data off of these other electronic data points?
Yes, sir. We have a number of devices that we use. For instance, with computers, we use a software and hardware combination called Celebrite. We also use something called Gray Key, which is for extracting data from phones. For computers, we use Axiom and kind of beefed up computer workstations.
Tell the jury what Celebrite is. You mentioned it.
Celebrate is basically a combination of hardware and software. It is it's a little device that plugs into the USB on your computer, and then you can plug phones into that and so forth and extract data from the phones. And then Celebrite has a second function, which it actually goes through that data and turns it into something that's readable and sortable and so forth.
Do you have particular training that allows you to use that particular, is it a device or what is it?
It's a device, it's a combination of hardware and software.
Do you have training that allows you to use that?
Yes, sir.
What does that training consist of?
Well, I have 3 different certifications with Celebrite, and basically 3 levels. The highest level is Celebrite Advanced Smartphone Analysis. It's just basically each one was the first 2 together were a week long, and then the CASA, the smartphone analysis one, was also a week long. That specifically dealt with using that tool. Basically, it's a hands-on program that you go and county spends a lot of money, and I sit there and learn how to use the machine, basically, and get an idea of what it's doing. So,
tell the jury about what the process would be like if I handed you a phone to use with this device. What process would you go through to obtain the data from that phone?
So effectively, if we know, for instance, we know the passcode, we'll use that as an example. We'll take that phone. We will, you set the phone up by enabling developer options and things like that. If it's Android, if it's iPhone, it's different. If it's iPhone, you just tell it to stay awake, basically. Then you plug the phone into the Celebrite UFED device, which is the little thing I talked about that you plug into your computer. And then you go through the steps on the screen that allows the phone, and you're interacting with the phone and the computer to set up permissions so that you can download data off the phone.
So basically selecting what data you want to extract from that phone?
Well, I mean, yes, what you're really doing is setting up the computer and the phone so that they can talk to each other. Generally, we do, I'm gonna go too deep in the nerd world for you, but we use an application programming interface, Celebrite, which is kind of like a translator. It allows Celebrite to speak to computer, right? And so, you know, iOS is talking to Windows at that point, so that it can say, okay, this is the data that you can pull off of the phone. And so that's kind of how that works. And so then it pulls the data off the phone. We then use the physical analyzer software to parse through that data and find the files that are in there.
What kind of things do you typically extract from a person's cell phone?
It depends on the phone, but oftentimes we extract pictures, text messages, instant messages, internet search histories, activity data, locations, all those types of things.
What do you do with that information?
We'll take that information through physical analyzer, and then we'll take and create what we call a Celebrite report. And that Celebrite report is basically a standalone piece of software that puts all that data into something that you can categorize and search and let me look at these time frames, or let me search for these keywords in the extraction of the data we were able to pull.
Is it typical that you obtain these phones that you use this device on comes from some other detective that's involved in an investigation?
Yes, sir, generally.
Will that detective generally give you some guidance as to what they might want off of that phone if you can obtain it?
Sometimes, frankly, again, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds but Celebrite's able to parse about 400 out of 4 million applications. Now that was a couple of years old, those numbers. So I generally try to pull as much as I can, and then I allow the detective to take and based on the scope of their warrant or their waiver, they go through that data and find out what's pertinent to their case, since I don't know the case like they do.
Okay, so you're kind of leading into the next area that I wanted to go into. Once you put this stuff into a Celebrite report, as you described, put it onto a disk, does that then make it accessible to other detectives in the investigation to use for whatever investigative purpose they may or may not have?
Yes, sir. So once we've done that, we'll turn that over to whatever team is going to examine the device, and they'll go through and say, okay, we need to find all the messages that may contain the word John. So they'll go through and search for those things, or whatever might be the case in their actual investigation.
Would they do that separate from working in hand in hand with you? They would do it on their own?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Are there other people with the sheriff's office that have training in being able to use the Celebrite device to obtain data off of phones or other devices?
Well, through attrition, no, currently I'm the only digital forensics detective with those certifications, or at least with current certifications.
Okay. Let's go back in time to January, February timeframe of 2020. Were you working at the sheriff's office back then?
Yes, sir.
Did you get involved in the investigation into the disappearance of Gannon Stauch?
Yes, sir.
What was your role in that investigation?
Again, basically what we just talked about. I was a digital forensics investigator dealing with DVR, computers, phones, etc.
Did you have an occasion to use Celebrite on 2 separate devices in that investigation?
Yes, sir.
When you get a device, like in this particular investigation that we're talking about, do you necessarily know who that particular device belongs to?
No.
So what information do you pay attention to make sure that the data that you extract from a device is assigned to that particular cell phone or whatever it might be?
Well, primarily the first thing we do is try to keep things separated, but I generally try to look at like IMEIs, the identifying numbers in the phone, That's generally how I try to identify which phone goes with which extraction, things like that.
When you said that kind of quickly, the court reporter looked at you. Did you say IMEI?
Yes, ma'am. IMEI.
Okay.
Sorry.
So is that an unique identifier that's assigned to cell phones?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's talk about, did you have a chance to look at a rose gold iPhone 8 in this case?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 222?
You may.
If you could just look over People's Exhibit 222, and when you're done looking it over, will you let me know?
I'm done.
Okay. Do you recognize People's Exhibit 222?
I do, sir.
What does it purport to be?
This is actually a Blu-ray disc containing a Celebrite of, I annotated it as Tisha's iPhone.
Okay. And when you do the Celebrite download, do you get the IMEI number? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to obtain phone number associated with a particular phone when you do the Celebrite?
Depends.
Okay.
At times we'll do an extraction with it just depends on the extraction.
Okay. Do you remember for this particular one, if you're able to get the phone number in the report for this particular iPhone?
I don't recall. I can look at my my report and see if that refreshes my memory.
Would that refresh your memory to look at your report?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may he refresh his memory with his report?
You may go ahead.
Thank you.
Do you have it up there with you?
I have, yes, sir.
Okay.
And so that the record's clear, you're asking for the phone number that's identified with this Celebrite extraction, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Excuse me just a second here while I pull out my Papa glasses. Yes, sir. I believe I have that here.
Okay. What was the number associated with that particular iPhone?
843-655-7-460.
Okay. 843-655-7460. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. When you do an examination on a phone with this Celebrite process, do you examine the phone for any physical damage?
Yes, sir. Generally, I'll look at the phone and see if the screen is cracked. I'll try to annotate those things in the report.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, there's multiple purposes. One is that we want to make sure that the device functions, so we're able to actually manipulate it to do the download. The other thing is we also want to make sure that we're showing the state of the phone when we receive it, so that down the road we can show that the phone's still in that same condition, that we didn't damage the phone or something.
Okay. Did this particular phone have any physical damage or defects?
Do you mind if I look at my report?
Would that refresh your memory?
Yes, sir.
May you refresh his memory with his report, Your Honor?
You may go ahead.
Thank you. I noted in the report that I observed no major defects on the device.
Okay. And then did you in fact perform a Celebrite extraction of that particular phone?
Yes, sir.
Is that extraction on People's Exhibit 222 that's in the envelope in front of you?
Yes, sir.
I move for admission of People's Exhibit 222.
Defense?
Subject to objection raised in prior hearing.
Right. The objection's overruled. The exhibit
222.
2 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach with 224?
You may go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Swap you out.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Have you had a chance to look over People's Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
What does it purport to be?
This is again, a Blu-ray disc with a Celebrite of item number 671, which was an iPhone.
And when you examined this particular iPhone, did you have any contextual information about who this iPhone belonged to, where it came from, anything like that?
I I don't recall. Actually, I may have heard that this was Tisha's other phone. I don't recall.
Okay. Was this by chance a phone that was seized in South Carolina from the defendant?
That was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. Do you remember, were you able to get the same kind of identifying information, IMEI, like you mentioned earlier on this phone?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if you were able to get a phone number associated with this particular phone?
I believe we were, yes.
Okay. Do you remember off the top of your head what that phone number might have been?
I would have to refer to the report.
Would that refresh your memory if it's in there?
It would.
Okay. May he refresh his memory, Your Honor.
May, go ahead.
Thank you.
Getting your glasses out again?
Yeah, either that or you'll have to hold it so I can see it further away like that. Sorry.
Your arms aren't quite long enough anymore?
No, sir, they've gotten shorter, I think. Let's see. Okay. The phone number associated with this phone is 843-798-1700, 1700.
Okay. Did you do a physical examination of this phone as well to look for any damage or defects?
I believe so.
You believe so, or you did, or
Yeah,
didn't?
yeah, I did. That was a
Okay.
matter, yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember what the results were, we'll say that. so.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory to look at your
would.
report?
Appreciate it. Actually, it looks like I didn't actually note on this one that any damage, which would indicate to me there probably wasn't any damage, but I didn't actually specifically note it in the report.
That's fine. Just so that we're very clear though, did you say was or was not any damage?
I'm assuming there wasn't. I think I would have noted it if there was. However,
Okay.
I didn't specifically note it.
Okay. And then did you actually go ahead and perform the Cellebrite extraction on that particular device as well?
Yes, sir.
Similar to the last device that we just talked about, did you place that on the disk and that's what's in People's Exhibit 224?
Yes, sir.
All right, move for admission of People's 224.
That's same objection. Overruled. Exhibit 224 will be admitted.
Okay. For these particular two devices, did you do anything beyond extracting and putting them on disk and admitting into evidence?
There were a team of us that that kind of looked through things. I don't recall that there was anything specifically that I did that somebody else didn't do as well that wouldn't have been annotated by them.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure. That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Polini.
Detective, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Sorry. So just so I understand, that somebody gives you a phone, then you hook it up to the Cellebrite, and the Cellebrite basically takes everything off of it it can, and that's put in a disk for the detective then to go through.
Effectively, there's kind of an intermediate step where we use that other software. There's the UFED software, which actually pulls the information, and then the physical analyzer software is a second piece of software that actually goes through that information and turns it into something that people can read. And then I create the report from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like the information that is being taken from the cell phone by Cellebrite, that's not contained by any dates or any other parameters. That would be up to the detective who does the search.
Correct, because Cellebrite doesn't, it would be kind of like if you had a self-driving car and you only taught it to recognize stop signs. You wouldn't want to trust that car to drive you around town because it doesn't know the rest of it, right?
Sure.
And so Cellebrite knows 400 out of 4 million applications that it knows how to sort through. So we pull as much as we can so that we have the ability, if we need to manually sort through the other things, if that makes any sense.
I mean, the Cellebrite will basically pull years and years. If I've had a cell phone for 5 years, it would literally, it possibly pull 5 years worth of text messages.
Maybe more. If you had pulled that information, if you had pulled information from another device over to your phone at some point, you say you're all the way back to well, whenever Android started, so, you know, so yeah, that's how that would work. So,
Okay, thank you, Detective.
absolutely.
Redirect.
No.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Detective Bauman? No? All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you very much.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
Yes, Sergeant Kurt Smith.
Okay, Kimberly. Sergeant Smith, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear affirm the testimony about to give this man will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
You all situated?
Yes, sir.
Good. Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. Will you please introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record?
My name is Kurt Smith, KURT-SMITH, and I'm a sergeant with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office
How long have you been with the sheriff's office?
since 2006.
What are your current assignment? What is your current assignment with the sheriff's office?
I'm currently the sergeant of the Major Crimes Unit.
What are your duties associated with that assignment?
We investigate homicides, officer-involved shootings, kidnappings, major felonies. I currently oversee 7 detectives who lead those investigations.
So that jumps into what I was going to ask about specifically as a sergeant, what do you do? And is it basically overseeing those detectives in their investigative efforts?
Yes, we manage their caseload. We manage and keep track of how the case is going, making sure it's thorough, accurate, making sure that all the leads are being followed up on, and making sure that they have the resources that they need to do their job.
What was your assignment with the sheriff's office back in January 2020?
I was the Special Victims Unit Sergeant, so I worked in the same investigation division, but I supervised 6 detectives who were doing crimes against children, things like that.
Did you get involved with the investigation into Gannon Stauch and him being missing?
Yes, sir.
How did you get involved in that investigation?
I was assigned to do several tasks. Obviously, it was a large investigation, so everybody within the division was assigned to a task or 2 at the time.
At some point, did you have get assigned a task to perform or celebrate extraction of a particular cell phone?
Yes, sir.
What kind of training do you have that allowed you to do that celebrate extraction?
In 2014, I was transferred to the investigation division as a detective. During that time period, I was trained how to do operate the Celebrate equipment. Since that time, I've done about 75 roughly downloads of cell phones.
Describe, and I don't need you to go into as much depth as we did with the last witness because we just talked about the same concept, but describe what that process looks like when you are trying to extract data from a cell phone from your perspective.
So you would plug in a phone to get a charge. You would plug the phone into the Celebrate machine. You go through and you have several options of different extractions that you could do. And basically it creates an image of the phone. So it's basically like creating a copy of that phone that goes in the computer, and then the Celebrate software will decode it, for a better word, and give you a report of what's on the phone itself.
What do you do with the information once you extract it from a phone?
The phone is it's generated into a report that's readable. It's usually a PDF or a couple different fonts or formats. That I burn to a disk and I place into evidence. I also give a copy to the detective so they can go through and look at the phone and see what's on it.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 227?
You may.
If you would look at People's 227 and let me know when you're done.
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize 227?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's a Blu-ray disc. It's item number 45 inside of an envelope.
What does the Blu-ray disc contain?
The Blu-ray contains the Celebrate report for the phone that I did.
Do you know what particular phone this was?
It was an iPhone 6, but I can't tell you whose phone it was, sir.
Okay. On the evidence label, does it give you some identifying information about the particular phone?
Yes, sir. It says it's the kid's phone.
He's reading off the evidence label, Your Honor.
Overruled.
What does it specifically say? If you could just read it.
Says Blu-ray containing Celebrite report from kid's phone, iPhone 6.
Okay. Does that just then contain the Celebrite of that iPhone 6 that you did a Celebrite download on?
Yes, sir.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that Celebrite report?
Yes, sir.
And move for admission of People's Exhibit 227.
Exhibit 227 will be admitted.
Similar to what we just talked about with the last detective that was on the stand, once it's on that disk and downloaded from the phone, is that then accessible for the greater investigation if detectives want to access it to maybe search for specific things that might have been contained on that phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was that the case with this particular disk?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Cross-examination, Mr. Tilley. Do any of the jurors have any questions for Sergeant Smith? No? All right. Thank you, Sergeant. You may step down.
Judge, if we may approach.
You may.
Oh, do you want to go? I was going to do that.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have seen a number of conferences up here, and you're not going to be surprised. But we were talking about a break for this morning. Trials are dicey things. Sometimes witnesses go a lot faster than you think they're going to, and sometimes they take a lot longer than you think you're going to. So the downside here is that we have some time that we're not going to be able to use. But what we're going to do is have you come back from lunch early. So we'll have you come back at 1 o'clock. And we should be able to start right on time at that point. Again, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Don't discuss the case with anyone else. Don't do any independent research about any aspect of this case. And we'll see you back at 1 o'clock then. All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record should reflect the jury has left the courtroom. Is there anything else we need to take up at this point in time? Prosecution?
There you are.
Defense?
No, sir.
Okay. We'll see everybody back at 1 o'clock then. Thank you.
All rise.
All right, so they are going to lunch until 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. The first witness of the day was the associate medical examiner in Florida that did Gannon's autopsy, and I will upload a separate video that's just that portion of this morning because it was so important. And then after the morning break, so that was the first witness before their morning break. After their morning break, the next witness was Al again. And what he testified to is during the medical examiner's testimony, she said that there was a large amount of hydrocodone found in Gannon's system. So what Al testified to was that in May of 2019, he suffered a finger injury due to his woodworking hobby in which he was prescribed hydrocodone. And it was in pill form, which also makes it kind of interesting. I think I was assuming, I think I was thinking like codeine or something, they give for coughs. But he said it was in pill form, and he testified that he only took a couple of them, and they kept them hidden in a drawer of his nightstand, and that the kids would not have known where they were. Only him and Leticia would have had that knowledge. And then the next witness was Andrew Cohen, and he is special agent FBI that wiretapped Leticia. And Andrew testified that Leticia purchased a new phone in Colorado after hers was confiscated, and that when she purchased it, she used a fictitious name to do so. During these recorded calls, the first two, the first was Leticia checking on her report from fakepolygraph.com. The second call they played, she called fakepolygraph.com back about resending the results of her fake polygraph. And then Leticia calls back a third time and tells the representative that she still hasn't received the report. And that's when he tells her that her report had been blocked by management due to the content of the questions. She then calls back again and questions why her report was blocked. She says that her questions were about infidelity and that those were within the fakepolygraph.com guidelines. And he tells her he'll look into it and call her back. And those calls were from February 18th, during the same time that Al's calls to Leticia were also being recorded. Angels among us, she had to have. I don't see you getting an 11-year-old boy to be able to take that many pills. I mean, who knows how many were in there, but like I said earlier, it'd be interesting to know if they recovered that pill bottle, if there was anything left in it. Then the fourth witness of the day was Christina Cervantez. I believe it was how you pronounced her name. She was an evidence technician for El Paso County Sheriff's Office, and she testified to getting phone calls requesting evidence back in relation to Leticia. She said that she never got a call from Leticia herself. In other words, Leticia saying that she was actually Leticia. One time, Leticia actually went in person asking for her property back, and Christina had spoken to her, so she recognized Leticia's voice. She'd had conversations with her prior. But in one particular phone call, Leticia called and Christina recognized her voice, of course. But Leticia was actually claiming to be Harley Hunt, who is Leticia's biological daughter. And in a recording that they played, she was wanting a book bag out of her impounded car. She also needed her MacBook for school. And she was told that it was in evidence and it couldn't be released back to her without a prior authorization. And they recommended that she call the lead detective. Now, to that call, Leticia also said she was a flight attendant, but keep in mind, she had said that she was Harley, and Harley was obviously too young for that kind of job, and it was also a red flag to this evidence technician. And then the next witness was a digital forensics detective, Michael Bauman, and he was with El Paso County Sheriff's Office. He is one of the detectives that extracted the info from Leticia's iPhone. Then the final witness of the morning was Kurt Smith. And at the time, Kurt was a special victims unit sergeant with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And he also downloaded data from an iPhone 6. And that iPhone 6 was described as kid's cell phone when it was placed into evidence. So that's it. That was the morning. The autopsy was really interesting. I mean, I followed this since, the day it went out on social media, and the rest of you, probably about the same time you heard of it. I was really shocked at a lot of what was said during the autopsy part first thing this morning. I was also surprised that they actually showed the pictures. I mean, I'm glad they did because it really shows us the true extent of Gannon's injuries and just how crazy this psycho bitch was in what she was doing to him. She used 3 different weapons. I think she said he had in total 18 sharp force injuries. He had 4 blunt force lacerations and 1 gunshot wound through the chin, and then also add the hydrocodone that she initially used. So she was making sure that Gannon was going to be gone one way or another. The wounds that he had really showed how much he tried to fight her back, which is maddening and absolutely saddening at the same time. So does anybody have any questions, any thoughts, comments about what we've heard so far, what we heard last week? I am uploading a video right now. I'm waiting on YouTube to review it, but it is the Nicole Mobley from last Friday, and that was the Facebook sleuth that was in all the Facebook groups who wound up befriending Leticia to try to get information out of her. And so I extracted just that portion of it and uploaded it as its own video. And that should be available sometime today. Deanna, I've never heard of anybody hearing a gunshot. So, I mean, I guess she was out in the middle of nowhere when she did it. I'm not sure. But so far, we haven't heard ever that somebody heard that from her. And also his switch. I wonder if they'll ever find his switch. All right, so I really appreciate you guys being here this morning. Please make sure you give the video a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, I would love to have you as a subscriber. Oh yeah, Angel, she had so much hatred in her. It's insane. That's why I want to really hear Harley talk. And, you know, hopefully she attests to how was she treated by her mom. I mean, well, at this point, we know how she was treated. Leticia really, really used Harley in a whole lot of this grand scheme that she came up with. But I'm very curious to hear what she has to say about how her mom, you know, parented her. Was she short fused, you know, things like that. Hopefully they talk about that stuff. All right, so I am going to close this live. I'll start another one back up in about an hour and 5 minutes when they come back from lunch, and we will see who the afternoon, who's going to testify for this afternoon. Again, I appreciate you guys being here very much, and I hope to see you back in about an hour. Have a great lunch, guys.